Fasting can have some amazing health benefits, and I personally love to use it for losing weight. However, critics of fasting are often saying that fasting only provides the benefits we see because at the same time calories are restricted. And we know that restricting calories can be very beneficial for us. However, this opens up the question, are there actually added benefits to fasting if we don't restrict calories? So I set out and tried to answer this question. I found some really interesting papers published by an American research group that were trying to answer exactly this question. Are there some added benefits to fasting if calories are maintained? So what the research group did for their first study was to enroll pre-diabetic people and divide them into two groups. One that followed a normal eating schedule of breakfast, lunch and dinner, who were eating over a time period of about 12 hours. And then the other group, which they called early time restricted feeding group, who were consuming all calories offered in a 6-hour window in the morning. And they measured a couple parameters for health over a time span of 5 weeks. And then they had a 7 weeks washout period and switched the diets. So what they found was actually pretty interesting. They found that the early time restricted feeding group showed improvements in the beta cell responsiveness as well as in insulin sensitivity. So both really important markers actually for when you're pre-diabetic or if you have diabetes, but also for healthy people, these are really important markers. They first of all looked at markers for heart health, so to say, and found that the early time restricted feeding group had showed improvements in blood pressure. Now on top of this, the early time restricted feeding group also showed improvements in their levels of oxidative stress, even though there were no improvements for inflammation or general stress like cortisol in general. However, what was also really interesting was that the early time restricted feeding group showed lower levels of appetite or hunger and higher levels of satiety, especially in the evening, even though they haven't eaten for a longer time period. So this first study already gives us an indication that there are added benefits to fasting, even if calories are the same. And we show that especially in terms of preventing diabetes or preventing heart diseases, it might be a really useful tool to apply. In a second study, the research group actually went a little bit further into the details and really wanted to figure out what is happening in the body when people restrict their calories into a short eating window. For this study, they recruited people who were generally healthy but slightly overweight with a BMI between 25 and 30. And here they monitored the people continuously for 4 days. So it's a rather short study, but the people were continuously monitored and blood was drawn every now and then, especially at the end of the study. Apparently the research group found so many interesting things in this study that they decided to split up the results and publish them in 2 different papers. So what they found was that the early time restricted feeding group had lower levels of our hunger hormone ghrelin, especially in the morning, which might sound counterintuitive because that's when this group hasn't been eating for the longest time period, for about 18 hours. But if you know a little bit about ghrelin, you know that it actually goes down when we don't eat and is not going up, even though you might think it would. Which makes snacking, by the way, a really bad idea if you have hunger cravings. Following the same line of thought, they also found that the hormone that reduces appetite, the PYY, was the highest in the evening for the time-restricted feeding group. Which again, sounds counterintuitive, but that's just how our body really works. They also attached continuous glucose monitors to the people and were measuring the glucose levels over the whole 4 days. And what they found was that the glucose levels for the group that ate in a 6-hour window were actually on average lower, even though they ate the same meals. The reduction we're seeing here might seem very small, but we have to keep in mind that this is only a 4-day study. And to be honest, I think every one of us would be happy to see any kind of result in only 4 days. So this is kind of exciting, to be honest. They also found that the early time-restricted feeding group had slightly elevated levels of the ketone body beta-hydroxybutyrate. However, they were still far away from being in ketosis, which is not so surprising because the macronutrient composition in this study was 50% carbohydrates, 35% fat, and 50% protein. So you would need to extend your fast quite a bit to reach ketosis. They also found that the HDL and LDL cholesterol was higher in the morning for the group that only eat in a 6-hour window, which is not really surprising because this is then when the body liberates the fat resources and shuttles them into the lipoproteins to provide energy throughout the body. Now the next thing they found was actually pretty exciting. They found that the stress hormone cortisol was higher in the morning and lower in the evening for the group that ate in a 6-hour window. And this is good news because we want to have cortisol high in the morning. Naturally, cortisol peaks in the morning and it's supposed to be low in the evening to help us fall asleep. Okay, my favorite result of the study is this here. They found that the brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is a very important protein for brain health, was increased in the group that ate in a 6-hour window, especially in the evening, and with a tendency, but not significantly, also in the morning. So this protein is really important in preventing Alzheimer's or just for cognition, memory, learning, you name it. I've made a separate video that explains on how to increase BDNF naturally. You can check it out afterwards if you like. The last thing the researchers did was measuring gene expression for circadian rhythm genes, autophagy, and aging genes. So they found that there is a more aligned circadian rhythm as it naturally should be, as well as there was an increase in autophagy, which again is generally speaking a good thing. And they also found that the gene that is generally associated with longevity was upregulated in the group that followed the early time-restricted feeding window. Alright, I hope this video motivates you to keep up your fasting, even if your goal is not necessarily to lose weight. It just seems like that our bodies like to not eat for a while and then eat bigger meals at once or eat in a shorter time window. Okay, I've been fasting now for almost 16 hours and before I'm gonna eat, I still need to go to the gym. Here are 2 more videos that you might like. Thank you for watching, consider subscribing, and hopefully see you next time.